Today we're going to talk about virtual private clouds, or VPCs. So we have our cubicle in our building and our part of a continent. Now if we want to do anything meaningful, we need to talk to each other. And a good analogy here is the internal phone system of a company. If you've worked in an office, chances are you had a phone that you could call your coworkers with. And some larger companies will split up the numbers and reserve a bunch of them. So let's say any number from 1000 to 1999 gets you the New York office. 2000 to 2999 goes to Boston, and numbers in the range from 3000 to 3999 come out in Chicago. Computer networks follow a similar principle. In AWS, the phones in our cubicle are called Network Interface Controller, or NIC for short. It is what EC2 instances use to connect to other computers. And together they form virtual private clouds, or VPCs, and subnets. A VPC spans an entire region and can have many subnets that span a single availability zone. And every EC2 instance has up to 3 NICs, but mostly just one. So by default our EC2 instance has a NIC, with which it can talk to everyone in a subnet. And in some cases we also have subnets in other buildings that we can talk to. Now let's imagine you forgot your phone at home today and your partner wants to call you in the office to ask when you'll be home. Can you do that in the AWS world? It depends. Let's imagine you have a lovely secretary named Steve, the security group, and Steve will monitor all calls coming from outside the company. Steve is also smart enough to know that when you called your doctor and are expecting a call back, it is fine to let that through to you. So Steve, the security group, is what's called stateful. At the same time, the company phone administrator Arthur has installed a block list for all phones in the whole building, so they can no longer call Tony, the telemarketer. This list is called an Access Control List, or ACL. The list is not like Steve. Even if you were allowed to call such a number, Arthur's ACL has to be specifically set up to also allow calls back from the number. It is what's called stateless. Let's look at what a question in the exam could look like before summarizing what we learned today. Question 1. Which AWS tool works like a firewall, controlling traffic to and from the subnets in a VPC? A. Security group. B. ACL. C. Network Interface Controller, or D. Availability Zone. A is wrong. Security groups are like Steve the secretary and control access to specific EC2 instances. B is correct. The control list can be seen as a firewall. C is wrong. Remember, a NIC is what an EC2 instance uses to connect to other computers, or in our analogy, a phone in a cubicle. And so D is also wrong. And an availability zone is what EC2 instances are physically located in, or the building in our analogy. Question 2. A subnet is specific to a A region, B EC2 instance, C availability zone, or D security group. A is wrong. A VPC is what spans a whole region. B is also wrong. C is correct. A subnet is within a VPC and specific to a certain availability zone. D is also wrong. The security group is a different concept. It controls who or what can reach an EC2 instance, or other services, but not a whole subnet. Okay, so to summarize, today we've learned about the structure and functionality of AWS VPCs and how they relate to EC2 instances, subnets, and regions. We've used the analogy of a company phone system to understand the concepts better. An EC2 instance is like a cubicle in an office building, and a network interface controller is like the phone in the cubicle. The NIC allows the EC2 instance to communicate with other instances. A VPC is a bit like an entire corporation's phone network that spans across different buildings in different continents. Each building has its own internal phone system, and each cubicle within a building can communicate with others in the same building. Security groups act like a secretary, think Steve, who screens incoming calls, or traffic, to your cubicle. They are stateful, meaning they remember the outgoing calls and allow the responses to come back in. Access Control Lists, or ACLs, are like the company's phone administrator Arthur, who controls which numbers can be dialed from the phones in the entire building. They are stateless, meaning they don't remember the outgoing calls and need explicit rules to allow the responses to come back in. We've also learned how these components interact. By default, an EC2 instance can communicate with others in the same subnet, and with the right configurations, it can communicate with instances in other subnets or even outside the VPC.